Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Survivor's Guide to Life on KTCA Petaluma 103.3 FM. I'm Jenny Stephenson, your host, and joining me is Dr. Peter Bernstein and Mimi Amaro. Today's
Dr.
show,
Amy.
Dr. Mimi Amaro. I was being kind. She
Thank
doesn't
you.
like that.
That's too bad.
Okay.
Just say it. It's
All
okay.
Today's show, we are continuing in our series on how to survive through adversity. Dr. Bernstein, or Peter, as he likes to be called, and Mimi, as she likes to be called.
Thank you.
Peter is a coach and mentor with 49 years of experience helping people survive and grow through trauma, struggles, and hard times, the stuff of real life. The goal of our series is to help you discover what we've experienced, that adversity is more than a trial to endure. It can be an exciting opportunity to learn, grow, and thrive.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah. I was just thinking about when you're saying that, it's also quite an experience and a privilege to be part of this side of life. And we've met so many incredible people. Once you strip away all the superficiality and the social, not the most meaningful stuff in the world, that may be, you come down to what really matters. And we are part of that world and part of the people that are in that. And it does usually involve pain and suffering and struggle and loss and pretty rough stuff, but it's one normal part of life. I consider it a privilege. I've never met so many good people. And I went to a funeral on Saturday of a friend that was killed in a car accident, and the place was packed with people I didn't think I knew that would know them, but I did. And it was really interesting because I went because I cared about the man who was killed, but I was also not sure what was going to happen there. It turned out to be an inspiring time and very hopeful. And it was almost like everything that's very superficial was just stripped away. And we were talking about what really mattered. And everybody there, the place was packed. It was a big place. When we talked afterwards, same thing. And amazing how many people are really dealing with difficult things in life. They don't know. A lot of times I consider them civilians or pedestrians in the sense of they have no support. They really don't know what to do in that time. They make it through, but they pay a high price. And one of the things we want to do is give them the knowledge and the tools for this part of life, because it's going to come for everybody. And so it's not such a shock. And so they're not pedestrians or civilians anymore, but they have some supportive abilities and skills, and that they'll know that there's people that can come alongside them that have true empathy and understanding. And I think we're on the right track, because when I met these folks and I listened, I did run into enough of them that I would consider very vulnerable civilians that had been going through very troubling and tough times. And when I talked to them and I heard what they were going through and how they were coping, it kind of set me back and going, these folks don't know how to handle this. And they need just some good people to come alongside them who have the heart, the empathy, and the experience to guide them. So it was an eye-opener, but it was also very inspiring.
We have someone like that with us
That's right,
today.
we do. A one of our favorite guests and one of our favorite people.
Yes.
Thank you.
And she's got a lot to say today. She's been saying it before.
We said, wait, save it.
We had to tell her to zip it up because we want to make sure it's on the radio show, the podcast, because she has a lot to say.
Yeah.
It's Mimi Amaro.
She not only has a lot to say, she has a new book.
A new book.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
And it's called Death Before and After, A Survivor's Guide. And I went through it last night, and I thought I was just going to,
Well, show
here we
everybody.
go.
There it is.
Zero in on this one. Zoom in on this.
Mimi says that
Thank
this it was published last week, and it has become an Amazon national and international bestseller.
And if you want to see what Mimi looks like when she dolls herself up, it's
Yeah.
on the back. Now, we don't see her that way too often, but this is a
She's
beautiful
usually
picture.
coming from the gym.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I
Anyway.
did just get out of the gym and just
When?
pop over
Today
here.
or after this?
Today. No, not there. I have makeup on there.
This
I don't have makeup
beautiful. Look
on.
how great she looks. Anyway, okay.
Thank
You can tell we love her, but she's also a very smart cookie. And
Thank
she's
you.
got a very down-to-earth side to her. I find this book to be very important and a great tool for people going through these difficulties that we've been talking about, and some of the logistics and some of the things that you need to know. And boy, when you're in crisis and you're losing someone or you're dealing with the end of life issues, it can be so hard to cope with the details and the challenges that are entailed and how much you need to know.
Yeah.
But I don't think a lot of people know.
No, and you came in this morning and you gave it, for you, a very high compliment. You said it was very practical. And for you, that's what matters. Can people pick this up and use it in a time when they are overwhelmed and stressed and grieving, suffering, losing someone? Can they pick this up and find some help for what they need to know? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's a lot of empathy to this. There's testimonials of folks sharing what they went through, and I'm going to let Mimi talk about this. This is going to be for her today, and for all of you. And I assure you, Steve is our technician is giving me signals here.
You're looking at this camera. This is the camera.
I'm supposed to know what he means. Okay, this camera.
Yeah, that's the camera.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, how about that?
Okay.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, this is Peter looking at the camera.
How
now.
about that? Well,
There.
good to see you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, getting back to what.
Yeah, I'd
No,
like
that matters too. But this
it does. But I'd like to hear Mimi, what brought this book to you, or what caused you to bring this book out of you?
Well, basically, about 6 years ago, my father was going through a journey. Actually, it was probably about 7.5 years ago, of cancer. He was diagnosed. My parents told me, prior to telling anyone, I was to keep it on the down low, basically hush hush, until they were ready to tell my siblings. But I was the first to know that he had cancer. I held that for about 8 months, and then I basically strongly suggested that he finally tell everybody in the family, sit him down and let him know that, he had cancer, he was not going to survive it, and that the journey was to begin, be with him as much as possible. So during that journey, I was the main support, emotional, mental, physical, asking questions during that process of the end of life for my father. And while I was going through it, I didn't realize how much I didn't know. I didn't know so much. I didn't know what bridges are going to come. I didn't know what tools I was going to need. I didn't know what questions I should ask or not ask. And I just felt, after walking that journey with my dad and supporting my mom, and then walking, through the dynamics of everything from hospice care, palliative care, living trusts, wills, family dynamics, etc.
So we're going to get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
You're going to tell us.
I just felt that after my dad passed, that I didn't want anybody to ever feel as lost and confused and not know how to process this type of the journey, because we're all going to face this at some point, regardless of who we are with a loved one, whether it be a parent or a sibling or a family member or even our spouse or loved one. So I just don't want anybody to feel the way I felt during that journey and that walk. And now I'm basically walking the end of life with my mom too, so I feel like I have a little bit more tools and understanding. But that's why the book came out, is because I don't ever want anybody to feel as confused and crossing each bridge not knowing how to cross it. Sure. I want to make it as easy as possible.
Well, that sounds like the true empathy, where you have to go through it yourself first, and not the good part, but the confusion, the difficulty, the overwhelming experience of it, and then come out of it with a sense of purpose. Mm-hmm. And that to us is so important, that even through these struggles and painful experiences that we have to go through for those that we love and care about, but there tends to be, the hope is that there is purpose in it all, even though it's hard to see at the time, because we're dealing with so many mechanical, logistical things every day.
Yes.
You can't really think so big and and so broad, because we're just dealing with this. Just
responding to the things that are happening day to day.
And that's plenty important. Yeah. But there is also a time to step back and reflect on what you're going through, and realize that there's going to be a purpose. There is hope. Although emotionally, it's not always that clear, particularly when you're in the emotion of it all. But I hear Mimi saying today is that her reflective time gave her, she also came to a sense of purpose and a deeper empathy for so many other people that she knows are going to go through, and or everyone goes through this.
Yeah.
But she's sharing, what I love to hear is that she was lost, she was confused, she didn't know what to do, and that's a crisis. Under these circumstances, it's a crisis. And she's saying if she could give folks some tools, that it could at least alleviate some of the stress and distress, and make it a little bit easier and give them a handle on some of the logistical things that have to happen, and that's what this book is about.
Yeah, it's a very practical, extremely practical. A lot of logistics, what the things that need to be thought about, possibly avenues that you can choose from. I put multiple things in there. I don't tell humans what to do. I just give options. Like these are some options that you might be able to think about. So yeah, I just, as I was, like I said, as I was going through it, I had to learn as I was going, and make the best decisions that I could make. I hope you're okay. So.
Must be the subject actually.
Right? Yeah. So, I wanted to share what I learned, and if that helps even one human in the world, then I feel that the book was worth it. Sitting down and writing it was worth it, so.
I think it's very practical. I'm dealing with things like this, and I have before. And the truth of the matter is, I'm one of those people that when I'm up challenged, I learn this stuff right at the seat of my pants. And I've learned a lot of the things that you've written about. And what you write about is very, very practical and realistic, and it has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
I am like that. I'm that kind of person anyway. But it would have been a lot nicer. Well, I guess I don't even know anymore because I've been doing it. But to have something like this as a guideline, that's to me really good.
Thank you.
I think we're going to go into a break, but I just want to throw in something that we can maybe talk about after the break, and that is, we've had this discussion before that there are times when a family member or a loved one is dying or very ill, and the challenge is for someone to become a caregiver, to stay and help, or whether they feel they can't handle the situation and might want to run. A book like this could help make a difference.
It definitely could. And I want to get back to something after the break too. Is that you said when it came up with her dad, she embraced it. She took it on. And I want to talk to her about that because the last time we did this,
you said you got to come back because I haven't learned this well enough.
No,
yet.
Because I'm one of the people that when something comes, I am engaged immediately.
Yeah.
But it's the people that run away. So she has much more empathy than I do, and a lot more. She's a lot more open-minded than Peter is, and Dr. Bernstein can be very judgmental at that time.
All right,
like,
so we'll come
back. Working on that.
We'll come back to that. You've been listening to The Survivor's Guide to Life on KPCA Petaluma at 103.3 FM. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back to The Survivor's Guide to Life. I'm your host, Jenny Stephenson. Today we are joined by one of our favorite guests, Mimi Amaro, who has a new book, Death, Before and After, A Survivor's Guide. And just before our break, we had asked Mimi to kind of describe the process of what drew her to writing this book, her experience of being a caregiver for her father and feeling lost and confused and needing some resources, practical information and support for the process she went through with him. We also talked about how this could help someone who feels overwhelmed in such a way that they might even not want to take on the caregiving role. So I know that this is a topic we've talked about before and is a challenge, and I know you bring in a whole side of this discussion that's important to hear both of you.
Well, I remember reading in the book last night. I thought I was going to just go browse through it and shut it down. I couldn't put it away, and it did keep me up really late.
I'm sorry, but I'm happy about that.
No, really. It's that. It was that. It had so much in it that I thought was very relevant. And certain things, most things I knew about, and certain things I didn't, and I was very interested. And I want to ask Mimi some of the questions about that. And we certainly have had the experiences that she writes about. We're still having, and dealing with my wife and my mother and so many people are coming to us
Yes.
that are dealing with this, and Jenny's dealing with it, her husband, other people, and it's just all over the place. So one of the things I wanted to ask her some questions about it, but I think that I wanted to go back to one thing. Not the most empathetic person right now on this issue, but she is, and that has to do with what this can, the impact that this can have on the family dynamics, the family, what families go through over this, what it reveals too, what it begins to bring out, and sometimes what wasn't there before, all of a sudden, new things come up,
becomes exposed or
or
crystallized,
something that they act completely out of character, and all of a sudden you got a completely different person on your hands.
It could be good, or it could be
I'm
hard.
talking about the ones that aren't. I love to hear about the ones that make that shift in between and say, I can't run. I can't bury my head in the sand. I have got to deal with this. It's that important.
I think that was Mimi.
That was Mimi.
Well, yeah, I had to, I guess, I kind of just stepped up. You know, I kind of soldiered up, and I was just there. I didn't really feel there was any reason not to. I have dealt with my own possible non-existence in my life. You know, at the age of 15, I was diagnosed to pass away. So this subject isn't scary for me. So maybe that contributed to why I'm okay with walking these journeys with my parents, or maybe not. But I would say most definitely facing my own possible death would give me more tools than someone who has always been healthy their whole entire lives. So, in that aspect, I think stepping up was easy for me.
Let's step back on that one for a minute. You just said a mouthful.
I kind of did.
Okay. So you're saying because of your past and what you've been through, and we already know this about it. She went through an awful lot, and she was facing her own death, inevitable death. She was very sick for a long time, and here she is. She doesn't look 51, but she is.
No.
She's been through. Yeah, right. She doesn't want anybody to know, but she is. I'm kidding.
No, it's okay.
But here she is. And 15, she wasn't supposed to make 15. Here she is, 51. Very courageous woman. And I call her a giant, even though physically she's small and cute. She is a giant of a person and a woman, because she has stepped up. And she, sometimes you go through these things and you can't understand. It seems so unfair and so difficult. And yet that's life, and it happens. And you wonder, what can come out of this for the good? Here I am going to die. I'm 15. The doctors tell me it's over. Get ready to die. And thank God she did it. But look at the purpose that she couldn't have possibly known that has come out of it.
Right.
And look at how much she's learned and what strength she has. That's Mimi. And she's used her experience and the purpose that came out of it as a calling on her life. She has a great deal of empathy, not just compassion, and that's what we love about her. She's not a little person. She's a giant, and I love her. But she mentioned something about she couldn't run away. She was going to just take it on. And last time we talked, the problem I do have this problem, but I don't consider it a problem, other people might, is when people run away in the face of this, Mr. Hero over here goes, where the heck are you going? And it doesn't matter what I say, they're going. And I don't always have a great deal of, what do you call it? My computer doesn't, my brain.
Your bandwidth?
It doesn't.
Processor doesn't.
It doesn't. Compute. I get it. And I don't relate to it, except I go, whoa, stop. And it doesn't always work. But Mimi has an empathy and an understanding about what this can do to a family and different family members. And she's talked about it in some of their testimonials in the book.
Those are powerful testimonials.
About some of the families.
Add to the book.
Yeah. I have to just say thank you to everybody who contributed testimonies, because they're anonymous, but they definitely help others in the book. And I just want to acknowledge that this was a co-creation. This was such a beautiful gift that they even offered.
Did you interview them?
I actually just asked a few humans I know that have dealt with this. I said, how would you feel like maybe anonymously writing something for the book? And they were absolutely. I would love to contribute, because this needs to be talked about, and I just want everyone to know. And it was kind of cathartic for them to be able to actually process it. And then I, held space for each human who did do testimony, and let them process with me.
What's that mean?
Basically talk about, when you're writing things down, things come up and emotions come up.
Right.
And to be able to hold a space and communicate and hear and have them be the sound, I could be the sounding board for them, so they could actually really just see and look at what they're talking about, and actually maybe just integrate it and process it.
Too much psychology here. I mean, not that it's not right, but I want to hear what it means. Holding space, what did that actually mean in fact?
Being a friend.
Being a friend.
Just being a friend and letting them, vent and spill whatever they were hurt about, and actually hearing them and witnessing them.
So you provided a safe
container space
place for them as a trusting, non-judgmental person who was sincere and genuine in what you were looking for from them, and that they knew that they would be safe to tell you what was happening with them.
Absolutely.
And that's what it means to hold space.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Good. And then that whatever they told me went to my grave. Nothing goes past me.
Unless they agree to it
Unless they agree to it. But see, it's anonymous, so you'll never know who actually wrote anything. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the individual human who wrote each individual testimony in there will always be with me, and it will.
So when you talked about processing now, I want to take every word that sounds too psychological and clinical and make it into something that anybody can relate to. What does that mean?
Well, when two friends get together and you have a co-created conversation, like, I hear and here I go with psychological words again.
That's right, I'll take it away. Just go ahead.
Yeah, I basically just let them say whatever they need to say. And then I witness what they're saying and, allow them to feel the pain or the sorrow. And I don't try to fix them. I just really actually just hear them and allow them to process it, meaning get it out of them, write it on paper, verbalize it so that they can face it. A Mimiism, face it, feel it, change it. I think we've talked about this.
What is?
It's a Mimiism. It's face it, feel it, change it. Don't stay in the feeling. Don't get stuck in the feeling. But without feeling whatever emotion or pain or feeling is behind what you're not facing, if you don't feel that moment in time and walk through that, there's no changing it. You can face it and skip right over feeling it, and then you're not going to change it.
Okay, interesting. So, you're right. You're on. Yeah. We usually break it down even more, and you're saying both interchangeably. We don't. The feeling state is what you're born with, and that's a norm. That's part of our brain and the way we read things, part of the way we pick things up. But there's emotions that go with experiences that are so strong and so overpowering that it's not just a feeling state anymore. It's a very strong emotional state.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're using those interchangeably, and most people do.
They do.
We don't, but most people do.
It helps to make this distinction.
Interestingly, yes. And interestingly, I went to a funeral, a big one, of my friend. Well, there were a couple of people there that I knew, and one had just lost his wife 2 months ago. And I was watching him, and I'd known about it. And once I realized who it was, of course, my heart went out to him because I'm losing my wife. When I realized, and he was leaving, I went and talked to him, and I asked him what he was doing. And he looked good. He's a nice-looking man, and he says, well, I go to the gym every day. I stopped smoking. I'm doing things to take care of myself, which are all good. And he looked pretty darn good, except emotionally. And I could see he was really grieving. Great deal of empathy that I saw in him for the people, the family, and I was so touched by it. But when I went up to him and asked him about that, he said, I said, are you grieving? Are you dealing with the emotions of the grief? And he said, no, I haven't. It's been 2 months at least. And I said, you got to do that. You're going to have to come to grief. He says, well, it's coming. And I said, everybody's different. I get it. But that's something you can't ignore. And that's what Mimi's saying right now.
By feeling.
That this is so important to bring about the transition, the change, to move on. You've got to deal with what's there.
To move
Otherwise,
through the emotions.
Yeah.
yes.
You have to
Otherwise,
feel
it
it.
plagues you, and it can. And I said this can really bite your heart if you don't take care of this. You
Yeah.
don't ignore it. Mimi's saying the same thing. That it's so important, and here she is. And I said to him, I said, I can't say his name, but I said, hey, I get what you're going through. I can help you if you want. Just keep that in mind, okay?
Yeah.
And he was the type of fella that needed a man's man type. I saw
A
that.
safe place.
A safe place.
Yes.
And I saw that. And
Yes.
I hope he took me seriously. He's a good man. I saw such sweet empathy in him. But I also saw this as a part of him, and I've heard this in lots of people. The grieving is so unique to individuals, and he said, "Well, I feel that it's beginning to come. It's had to be 2 or 3 months, and he hasn't shed a tear. And I know people that have gone on longer than that.
Yes.
And it does affect them, and it takes a toll. So
Yeah.
I hear that's what you're saying.
Correct.
Is so important to hold. That's what you hold that space, give them a safe place, and let them vent.
Yes.
Verbally, we feel that has to be emotionally and
As
physically too,
Yes.
which we help with. But I think Mimi's right on track. I just had a talk with people at hospice the other day saying, and they right at your side, they do that too. But I tell them, and they're wonderful with me. They love me. We've worked with them before for other people. Now it's for me. And our staff, they're coming to talk to all our team tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
But it was interesting, and I said, you know what? We do other things that you guys need to think about, and that is, this affects the body. This is affecting, people have to have a way of getting this out.
Yes.
And talking about it may not be quite enough. And I said, for me, it definitely isn't. So we do the other parts too, and you have to. And they're very well-meaning. Hospice people are angels; they're wonderful, but they don't do that. And I feel you got to do the whole thing.
Yes, I agree.
And I know what Amy does.
Yeah.
She does that too.
You've been listening to the Survivor's Guide to Life on KPCA Petaluma 103.3 FM. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back to the Survivor's Guide to Life. I'm your host, Jenny Stephenson. Today we're joined by Mimi Amaro, and we're talking about her recently published book, Death, Before and After, A Survivor's Guide. And just before our break, we were talking a bit about the difficulty but the importance of working through the emotions of grief and what it takes to be able to do that, and how we can help each other to do that as well. We were talking about both the emotional and the physical side, and the difference between feelings and emotions. So let's continue that discussion.
And I do want to ask, I have some questions about the book specifics, but yeah, I was just thinking to myself, no, don't talk too much, because I want
to make sure that we get...
This is about Mimi.
No,
are you getting her? Is she hiding from the camera?
I'm trying.
She can't do it.
Don't let her.
I know.
Do not let her do this.
Hide.
Because that can be very reassuring to look at you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no. And also, Mimi has not all the time, but most of the time, she can uplift
for all of us.
I know, but no, she can really be uplifting.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
And her presence is very positive and encouraging and hopeful a lot of the time.
Almost all the time.
She's wonderful that way. Other times she's not, but
she's
most of the time
she is.
She
and she can have her moments. But
right? Most of the time she is
very
truly
positive and uplifting.
That's her.
Yeah.
And most
Thank
of the
you.
time, yeah. So she knows and she's been through plenty, and she still is going through plenty.
She is just the person to be writing this
Absolutely.
book. Why don't you ask her a question?
Okay. There are plenty of things I saw in the book that I know about already, but there were certain things that I hadn't heard defined before. And
I will do my best.
This is before and after, and we were talking about specifically, I think, hospice and palliative care type of things. I don't remember exactly where it is in the book, but it's here. And that's one thing I want her to clarify.
Oh, was it the difference between palliative care and end-of-life care?
I want her to tell us about those things, and then I have a specific question about the pre-active and the after phase.
Actually, yeah, Wow.
See, I never heard that before.
You never heard of those?
No.
Okay, yeah, it's in the book. I'm trying to recall everything that was basically
If
outlined.
you don't remember it, I do. I just read it last night. So
Right, yeah, no, you can definitely help out because it's been a little bit since I've written and read the book.
You know, so I wrote a book and I'm the same way. I don't remember that
He
stuff.
reads it.
Yeah.
Wow.
No,
Yeah.
go ahead.
And I wrote that? Yeah, I actually
you
wrote
know,
that.
I'm like that a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. It's because once you're finished making it all,
You're right. It
you
does
know, you
happen.
have to
But
move on to the next stage. But
don't worry.
hospice care is basically, I think the main thing about hospice that I would really like to share is that I think a lot of humans feel that once you're on hospice care, that's it. It's going to be towards the end, and this is the end of the loved one's life, but it's not, because hospice care can come in, and then what hospice care does is just help until they possibly can get on their feet a little bit again, and then they go off. So you can go on and off of hospice care for years. It's not the end stage. Now, palliative care is more of the end stage, where you're just keeping someone comfortable, and you know, they give medications to lessen the pain. They give morphine most of the time to help with the breathing. Morphine's really, really, really good for helping end of life breathing process, because at the end of life it gets harder to breathe. So they use morphine for that, from what I understand. And morphine doesn't necessarily get rid of pain, but it is definitely used for the labored breathing. So the difference between hospice care and palliative care, I would be more inclined to say, is that the palliative care is towards the very, 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 very end.
Really? Because I thought it was like when people talk, and I know because we deal with just what you experienced. We're experiencing with Lynn, and she's been in and out of hospice 3 times already.
See, in hospice,
twice,
Twice?
With hospice you can do that. Hospice will come in, and you can get off of hospice, and then they'll be on their own for a little bit, and then they'll go back on hospice. So I just don't. I would like to encourage others to think, just because they say hospice doesn't mean, oh my God, this is it, they're going to pass in a week. Because it doesn't work like that.
No. And you know what? Nobody knows when the end is going to come. But they do come to a point, this is what they call end-of-life issues. And hospice is more well-equipped than most MDs to deal with it. That's their specialty.
Yes.
And what we find that even geriatricians, who we consider can be very good,
highly expert in
Yeah,
geriatric
but when it comes
issues.
to the end of life issues, I would
It's a different approach,
Yeah.
a little bit different.
I think
Yes.
hospice has got more experience, really, and expertise at it. They're certainly more tuned into the family, and the support of what it takes, and they listen to what the family knows about the loved one, and they don't judge it. They don't use medical work to overpower the people. They listen and they go, "You're the experts. You're the ones we're listening to. You know what could be best, but here's what we would suggest." But we're paying attention to they're very sensitive.
Mindful.
Where MDs are not.
No,
they have their own opinions about how things should go, and they come in hard.
One thing about hospice is that they have always said paid careful attention to what you were ready for. Are you ready to go on to this part?
Yeah.
No, I'm not, and I don't think Lynn is either. And they trust that.
That's good. Now, I like to hear this, because the hospice care, like I think we've discussed this in previous podcasts, in each county the hospice care is different.
Which you mentioned in your book.
Yeah, because in the county that my father was in, the funding was not there.
That's
so
Lake County, right?
It was Lake County. It was not as efficient as one would want. And in that case, the doctor, who I have the utmost respect for, was the more kind, empathetic human than the hospice care was. So it was just flipped for me than what you're explaining.
Your testimony was in the book,
Yes.
and it was powerful to hear what he said to you.
Yes.
Just how
What do you remember?
The doctor, go ahead, what do you remember?
What do you remember?
Mimi was trying to care for her father when toward the end, and he was having seizures, almost constant seizures. And she went into a weekend without the medication that he needed, without any way to get the medication. And she was awake all weekend, trying to honor her father's wishes to be at home.
Yes.
And finally, she and her mother decided together that they could not continue. They took her father to the hospital, and when he woke up and realized he was there and that he was not at home, the doctor stepped in and said, "Sir, your wife and your daughter are exhausted and they could not continue, and you're here, and we're going to do our best for you now."
And they did. It was amazing. And I'm really glad it was him, because my father is a man's man, and he's old school Portuguese. And for
Portuguese, that's right,
another,
Portuguese.
yeah, another man to be able to explain that so kindly and generously. And he kind of, my father had kind of a really soft heart for his doctor. He was like a younger man, kind of. My dad just really thought super highly of this young man. And basically it was just perfect. It was the best thing that could ever happen. Was he just said, "This is the way it's going to be." And my dad, he was just got this calmness over him, and he laid back down and he just stayed there, like, and they gave him seizure medicines, and they gave him the palliative care to keep him comfortable, and we stayed there for 5 days holding his hand, and I just kept saying, "It's okay, Dad. You just exhale. You don't breathe back in. It's okay to leave. I got Mom."
Can I say, was that now I've seen different hospice programs. Was that a hospice
That
unit?
was a hospital.
I know, that's what I was going to ask. That wasn't a hospice unit in a hospital.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
That was St. Helena Cancer Center, and that was Dr. Ethan Schramm. And if anybody is going through a cancer journey, I highly recommend that, because he's an incredible doctor and an incredible human.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I know when my dad was dying in Florida, they actually had a hospice ward.
In the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the hospital. And that, we don't have that here, that I know.
Yeah.
Well, we don't
Yeah,
deal with it that way when it's at home. And that's the way we want it.
Yeah.
But and in Florida, they actually have a unit that's just a hospice unit.
Yes, for an
And
assisted
it's overwhelming to see
skilled
all
nursing,
these people in a whole ward, and they're
Yeah.
all in the last stages.
Yeah.
It was so powerful. Because rarely do you ever see anything like that. To see people in their last throes fighting for the last breath. And, but it was quite touching. And but I don't think the hospital is the best place most of the time.
Yeah.
No, I really don't.
I have to agree.
Maybe the value here is to describe what situation to look for.
Mm-hmm.
When have you got things put together in a way that works for your family? Where are you going to find that, and what should that look like?
Yeah. And we wanted to have him at home, but they just, because of the hospice, the county didn't have the funding. We didn't have the right medications, and it was just not going to happen.
And you know how different that is from Petaluma?
Oh, you know how different that is from a lot of other
I don't
places?
know.
Yeah.
I'm just finding out. But
yeah.
Petaluma is considered one of the top-notch hospice, and it is.
Yeah. Same with Marin County. Hospice in Marin is amazing too, from what I hear.
Boy, these people here are wonderful.
Yes.
But they do provide the medications. They're there when we need them, day or night.
That's beautiful.
They're
I like
they're
hearing
marvelous.
that.
Yeah. I would say, to me, a hospital is not the best place most of the time for people that are in the last stages.
Absolutely.
But sometimes, like you said, I saw you last week. I had been up all night with Lynn. I had an hour and a half of sleep. I was beyond exhausted. To me, it was beyond a privilege. I wanted to be there for Lynn.
Yeah.
But I have 5 caregivers.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, how many people do that?
Yeah, because in the hospital with my father, that weekend I was awake for 50 hours straight. I did not sleep for 50 hours. And then we just couldn't do it anymore, so we went to the hospital.
It is exhausting.
Yeah, they brought in, when my dad had a private room, they brought in these like bed seats that we slept in, so if my mom wasn't holding his hand, I would hold his hand.
Yeah.
My former boyfriend flew in. He was the only other one who came and stayed in the hospital room with us to help us.
And this was the last 5 days of your dad's life?
The last 5 days of my dad's life.
Yeah. I was there for my dad the last 4, I'm trying to remember, 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
And that was in a hospital. Yeah. But I remember just, interesting, when I finally left and I was exhausted, he died 3 hours later. Yeah, and they notified me. It was like, I think 5 or 6 in the morning, and I had just left maybe at 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
It happens that way, but I was there with him, but that was really set up strictly for hospice. We don't have that here, do we? I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't either.
I
don't know that either. But I don't hear it. I don't hear that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know that one.
I know you've got another question for Mimi, so let's hold that and After the break, you've been listening to the Survivor's Guide to Life on KPCA Petaluma 103.3 FM. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back to the Survivor's Guide to Life. I'm your host, Jenny Stephenson, and we're here today with Mimi Amaro, the author of Death, Before and After, A Survivor's Guide. And in our last segment, we talked about, Peter had a question about some of the aspects of hospice care and palliative care and end-of-life care and what kind of situations we can look for and hope for our loved ones. And you had another question about...
That one I knew the answer to, but I wanted it for the public. But there was something in it that I had never heard about called pre-active and active phases of dying.
Yeah, I think we should actually look in the book so we're accurate. But I think part of it is we can have, because he remembers where the pages are.
Oh, this was a test.
Yeah, right.
Oh dear.
I failed.
Oh,
It's
now we're holding.
Does it have
the
an index?
I'm okay, right?
Is this a helpful book with
This
an
is
index?
this is called holding
I
her
failed
accountable.
the test.
Did she really write this
Basically,
book?
Multiple
yeah, I
choice.
did. Except,
You know
however,
something? It's all right. I wrote a book and I do it all the time.
Yeah, it's just so hard because I put so much in there,
Of
you know,
course.
and there's actually like the after, you know, the burial part that I would love to bring up because I know a lot.
Let's save a little time for that.
Okay.
But the process, I know, like towards the
As
the
death
first
approaches.
active part is basically humans stop eating or slow down eating, and that's a very important thing because when someone's on hospice or their loved one is in a care facility, the caregivers want to continue to feed, but the body slows down because it doesn't need the fuel from the food anymore. So water slows down, intake of food slows down, and if you can communicate, and I don't know exactly where in the pre-active or active, but that's one of the main signs of, you know, the body's just starting to gear towards slowing down and shutting down, and not to fight that process. I mean, be able to communicate with your caregiver in a facility or in hospice that it's okay if they don't want to eat, don't force them to eat.
Hospice knows that.
Yes.
Because they say that all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. But this is on page 68, Mimi.
Okay, yeah, I got to note this.
Okay, it's called Some of End-of-Life Signs.
Yes.
And talked about some of this, and we've seen some of these, the coolness, the confusion, sleeping a lot, incontinence, restlessness, congestion, urine decrease, fluid and food decrease, change in breath, and fevers. That is one phase, but I want to tell you something.
Yes.
People can come out of this.
Yeah.
And we've seen them go back to the other. It's
true.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Because when you see this and then you'll look at them,
it's not linear.
It's a roller coaster. No, it's not. Anyway, but it says there are two, this is page 69, Mimi?
Okay,
Of your
69,
book.
guys.
Yeah,
69.
okay. There are two understood phases of death, which are called the pre-active phase and the active phase.
Yeah.
These aspects are usually discussed with the surviving family friends who are witnessing the death of a loved one toward the end of life. Pre-active phase means there's increased confusion, agitation, and restlessness. We've seen that. Pausing in the breath, whether awake or asleep, we've seen that. And I've seen really at the end, when I was in that ward in Florida, it was unbelievable. They were really at the end. And the pauses in breath and the death rattles and the sounds and the agitation and the restlessness, and yet they were completely unconscious.
Yeah, the death rattle, that's like super bad congestion, it sounds like, but it's not. And it's really hard to hear when you're with your loved one, that it sounds like they're almost suffering or drowning in fluid, but they're not because of the medication and palliative care. They're actually comfortable, and the morphine helps with that right there.
I know.
Yeah.
I was surprised. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But to see so many doing it, and why
it's part of the process.
It was overwhelming.
Yes.
Reports of seeing people who already died. Okay, active phase. These are phases of getting to die. Inability to arouse the patient. Dramatic changes in breathing. Severely increased respiratory congestion or fluid buildup in the lungs. Darkening and decreased urine output. Blood pressure dropping. We've seen these. And this says, again, these are merely a few significant signs of these two phases, but it's recommended to diligently research more.
Yes.
And while we're walking through the process, including researching each step, it's always recommended to talk with someone so you don't feel alone or isolated.
Yeah.
And by confiding in someone during this time of hardship, it may help to reduce some of the effects of losing a loved one or friend. It certainly can help.
Yes.
It's not going to alleviate what you have to go through, though.
Yeah, no.
Mhm.
Again, you have to face it, feel it, all of it. Yeah.
Mhm.
And this just goes to show that this was not, this is not programmed. We're flying by the seat of our pants here. Since he tested me and I couldn't remember what page, so.
I have complete empathy, though.
Do you have complete empathy?
Sure.
Yeah,
I write a book and then I go to
Yeah.
He
talk
comes
to
in and
groups.
says, I read the
This
book.
is live.
Do you remember this part? This is
Yeah.
really good.
How many times
Yeah.
does that come up? And I go, that sounds really good. And they go, that's from your
You
book.
wrote that.
Yeah.
You wrote that. And I go, you're right. I forgot.
Right? It's just because we've moved on to another stage or project.
I'm always like that with all of
Yeah.
our projects. Once they're done,
too.
we're
We
on.
move on.
Yeah.
Except that there is an area of the book that you wanted to bring up.
Oh yes.
What's that?
And it's okay. When you go to do burial, there's different beliefs and different desires, and please putting a live and trust what you want specifically.
You mentioned
Okay.
living trust.
Yeah, living trust basically, or your medical directive. The human who is passing, or the elder, or the parent, or whomever is going to write one. Put specifics of exactly what you want, like especially your end of life wishes, like I want to be cremated, I want to be buried, I want.
Okay, you're saying this quickly. You're going to be able to find this in getting her book.
All of it in the book. And
It's
thank
all
you so
broken
much
down specifically
for
in her
showing
book.
the
So
book.
she goes over it quickly because it's off the top of her head. She knows it.
Yeah.
But it's all written in here
Yeah.
step by
Yeah.
step.
So
And
the
you can get it on Amazon.
Okay, go ahead.
So basically, the things that I wanted to mention were I do talk about burial and cremation, but there's two things in there. One I talked about, one I didn't, and one is called a pod burial,
What
which
is
I
that?
thought was great. I thought it was fascinating. I needed to put it
It's
in.
in the book.
Yes, and it's basically where a human body gets put into like a sack and gets buried in the ground, and then there's a tree buried on top of the human body, and I'm assuming that as it decomposes it gives nutrients to the tree and it makes the tree
Really?
grow. Yeah, it's called
That
a
sounds
pod burial. It's beautiful.
That could be very meaningful.
Wow.
Yeah, especially since we need more trees in the world. So that's another way of
Mimi's from
having a
California.
burial.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I never heard of that.
I never heard of it either. And then just the other day, I was in Starbucks talking to a gentleman, and I think he said Missouri is where the company is, but I don't remember the name of the company. But he and his family, for a loved one, recently ordered what they needed to build the coffin. So they got all the family together. They actually had the stuff sent to the house. They did a total ritual. This is a beautiful way to do a ritual and process and hands-on and cry and talk and they actually built the coffin. They had their loved one put in it, and then they buried it on a specific space, a land somewhere where they chose.
No kidding.
Yeah, and I didn't know about that, but I heard it was some Missouri company.
Very sweet.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful ritual.
Is that in your?
That is not in the book. That's the only one that's not in the book because I didn't know about
too.
it.
You got a lot in here, but not that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's beautiful. I know I've been going through a lot of planning.
Yeah.
For my wife and my mother.
Yeah.
And I did it for other people in my family. I'm usually the person that is responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And but this one I've been.
You had spoken with Lynn though, because many times you'll say, no, this is what Lynn wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So you went ahead and you did what Mimi is talking about, which is talk before, find out what they want.
That's right. And
Absolutely.
we even picked out the cemetery she wanted to be buried in. She said, I want to be here.
Good.
Which I followed her directives on.
Yeah.
But I also, I got to say, because I'm not in a crisis this time,
Mm-hmm.
so much nicer. I could get to know the people that are selling. It is
It's a
marketing
business,
and sales. I'm
yeah.
telling you,
Yeah.
and comparative shopping. And boy, forgive me, there's no accountability for these people in this business because the prices can vary enormously at the
Yeah.
same place over a short period. And they say, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And they do.
No
And it can be
regulation.
very costly, by the way.
Yeah.
Particularly burials. And I know I put a certain amount away for Lynn, and so we're already over budget. But we'll do it whatever I hope will make her happy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do. But I've done a lot of things, and I've checked out mortuaries, the ones that are sweet and loving. What we're finding, I discovered this weekend. I had picked out a wonderful mortuary. The people are just angels, and I love them. That's Adobe Creek. I want to they are such good people, and they helped me. We picked out the coffin. They're incredible. But their chapel can hold 80 people. Okay, well that sounds like a lot. And then I went to a funeral this weekend where it was a big...
Hundreds, right?
Right. And I'm thinking, Lynn is a very popular woman in Petaluma.
Jeez, yeah.
Holy mackerel. I mean, there are so many people interested in what she's going through, so many people that are inspired and asking me. And I'm thinking, their chapel's not going to be big enough.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I was learning as I was going here, this is the better place for her. Not as the mortuary, but as for the memorial service, because it could probably hold 300 people or more. I don't know.
Yes.
But I talked to the pastor, and he knows us, and I mean, it sounded like Zach was agreeable to working it out for us. So I'm learning as I'm going, because you don't have all the specifics down. I thought I have as many as I could do, but there's still so many questions that are in my mind that I didn't have the exact answers for, but I'm getting answers, and that was one of them. So I'm learning, and it is really nice not to go in crisis mode to do all of this.
That's what I hope this book does too. You know, not other than allowing others to feel not alone during the process, but to help maybe ease the crisis aspect of it, like just give a little insight, and then also create a safe way of bringing this subject up, and have families and friends and everybody talk about this. This is inevitable. We're all going to be here. We're all going to walk this journey with somebody or ourselves. So hopefully, you know, this book will allow the subject to come up in a healthy, safe way, so you know we can all start having conversations.
Absolutely,
around
it does. And
I
but there are certain people that won't, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because you're going to educate me again.
We have about a minute, so you better get to it.
At the end? Are we almost at the end?
We're almost to the end.
Okay.
Really?
We are.
She'll have to come back, because I still have a question about what do you do about the people that don't want to talk about it and don't want to deal with it?
You have to honor them.
What do you mean honor them?
You have to. No, you don't.
You have to honor the crap.
The short answer, Mimi, is no, don't beat them up.
Yeah, don't beat them up.
So what do you do?
It's just basically, you know, do the best that you can do. Embrace, and I'm going to say this fast, but embrace what you can tolerate and walk with your loved one, but allow others to have their process without throwing guilt or without trying to, you know, have any kind of resentment towards them. And yes, I can come back if you wish, and I'm grateful for the offer.
I do want to come back.
But to discuss this more, it's not everybody has all the tools that you have. Not everybody has all the tools that I have. And to expect or project someone else to do what you have the capacity to do, that's not fair to them. It's just not. We have to be a little more tolerant of everybody else's process or path and journey and capacity to face something. In their own time, they will face it. They will feel it, and they'll have to deal with it in one way or another. But to force somebody, that is like asking for trouble.
But you know, I do know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because part of me knows that and acts on that.
Yeah.
There's just the other part of me that's left back from Newark, New Jersey.
That says
that doesn't work well.
Right?
Yeah, because you don't run away from anything unless you're in a web. But I do know what you're saying is true.
Yeah.
And I'm also finding that you need to find a way to forgive these people and realize that they aren't equipped. And it's hard to figure it out sometimes. And I'm a pretty smart guy, and part of me can't always compute how they could do that. But
maybe it's not much of forgiving them, but realizing that it has nothing to do with you. So then you don't have to forgive them because it's not reflected upon you. You're being you and doing your journey, and that's their journey. And rather than you have to forgive them, it's not about you, it's about them.
Okay, I told you she's a doctor. Don't let her fool you, even though she's Mimi. a smart woman, and she's got a lot of empathy and heart.
Thank you.
And I love her. And we sure want you back.
She
Thank you
must
so
come
much.
back. Yeah,
And
thank
this-
you for being here today.
And this book
Yeah.
really fits
I
with the
hope so.
safe space
I hope
Yes.
so.
that we want to put the message out in this
Yeah.
book, and you are on the same page.
So I'm
Thank you,
going to hold
guys.
it up one more time. Death, Before and After, A Survivor's Guide by Mimi Amaro, available on Amazon.
And
Thank you
we
so much.
endorse it.
And we love her.
And we
She's-
love her, and we endorse
she's
the
a
book
great-
100%.
100%.
Wow, that means a lot. Thank you so much.
The Survivor's Guide to Life is made possible through a grant from Sonoma Coast Trauma Treatment, a 501c3 public charity that relies entirely on donations from people like you. If our podcast and the information it provides, and you've gotten some great information today, if it's benefited you, please consider supporting Sonoma Coast Trauma Treatment at sctraumatreatment.org. Also, we're on social media, Facebook and Instagram. You can reach us at 707-781-3335. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.